first three podcasts in this series, titled The Days of Noah, we looked at the strange biblical account in Genesis chapter 6 of the sons of God, sometimes called angels, coming from heaven and mating with human women and producing giants or Nephilim. We then talked about how this same story of the Nephilim is recorded in much greater detail in an ancient book called the Book of Enoch. We know that this particular book was widely known and read during Second Temple Judaism, the time of Jesus, because archaeologists found 11 copies of it in the Dead Sea Scrolls collection. We even noted that the author of the biblical book of Jude quotes the book of Enoch directly, and the author of 2 Peter provides information about this particular Genesis incident that can only be found in the book of Enoch. In our last podcast, we started to read the account of these sons of God called the Watchers in the book of Enoch. We read chapters 1 through 10 and connected one of the lead characters in the story, Azazel, with the biblical tradition of Yom Kippur described in Leviticus 16. Please go back and listen to parts 1 through 3 if you haven't done so. In part 3, we had just finished reading chapter 10 of the book of Enoch, where we find the story of the Watchers. I want to emphasize how the book of Enoch connects the story of the Watchers to the story of Noah. It is because of the sin of these angels and the havoc it caused on the world that God saw it necessary to destroy the entire earth with a flood. Also, we read that the punishment for the Watchers was that they were to be bound in a type of prison until the final day of judgment, when they will be thrown into the eternal fire. We're told that their children, the giants, the Nephilim, turned on each other and killed each other.
And before we finish reading the story of the Watchers in the book of Enoch, I want to address the fact that the Bible says that the giants existed in the land after the flood. Genesis 6:4, the Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also afterwards, when the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and had children by them. They were the heroes of old, men of renown. And Numbers 13, verse 33, we saw the Nephilim there, the descendants of Enoch, come from the Nephilim. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them. Of course, there have been different views of exactly these verses, what these verses mean. Some argue that the Genesis flood was regional, meaning it did not destroy the entire earth, that some giants could have survived. Deuteronomy 3:11 identifies King Og of Bashan as the last of the Rephaim, a race of giants associated with the Nephilim. How did his family line survive a worldwide flood? Adherents of this view also argue that the wording used in Genesis 6 for the whole earth is used in other parts of the Bible where it clearly does not mean the whole earth. This is definitely true, but unfortunately, we don't have time in this podcast to address this matter in great detail.
Gary, this podcast would be even longer, and this
Even
series
longer.
would be
We're
even
going to keep
longer.
going.
We went through all the details.
Right.
The other option that is that the origin of the giants after the flood was exactly the same as the origin of the giants before the flood, a forbidden union between angels and humans. Perhaps there were other angels who didn't learn the lesson of the original rebellious angels. If angels behave any bit like humans, and apparently they do, then they tend to have to learn the hard way. We have to, touch the hot stove in order to learn that, we shouldn't do that. We can't just simply listen to someone warn us not to do that. Nobody can say for sure exactly how these giants show back up after the great flood, but they do. What's interesting about the option for explaining the giants is that theoretically, rebellious angels could interact with humans anytime, even today. That's an intriguing idea, option 2.
Yeah, well, it might explain the craziness and the perversion that we see on the earth today. I mean, I think it may be the only explanation.
It might be the only explanation. I guess nobody knows that for sure.
We won't know for sure, but I think the behavior bears out that it's beyond, maybe beyond human.
Beyond human, yeah. Exactly.
But let's finish reading the book of Enoch. To set the stage, the story says that the Watchers sent Enoch to God to intercede on their behalf. And it was obviously for their grievous sin. First Enoch chapter 15 records God's response. Go, say to the watchers of the heaven who have sent thee to intercede for them. You should intercede for men and not men for you. Wherefore have ye left the high, holy, and eternal heaven, and lain with women, and defiled yourselves with the daughters of men, and taken to yourselves wives, and done like the children of earth, and begotten giants as your sons? And though ye were holy, spiritual, living the eternal life, you have defiled yourself with the blood of women, and have begotten children with the blood of flesh. And as the children of men have lusted after flesh and blood, as those also who die and perish. Therefore have I given them to wives also, that they might impregnate them and beget children by them, that thus nothing might be wanting to them on earth. But you were formerly spiritual, living the eternal life, and immortal for all generations of the world. And therefore I have not appointed wives for you, but as for the spiritual ones of the heaven, in heaven is their dwelling.
So what does all of this mean? Let's kind of summarize this a little bit. So the watchers are spiritual beings who reside in heaven. They are eternal. They do not die. Thus, there's no need for them to procreate. Thus, no wives. Yet they lusted after human women nonetheless. Now, this consummation produces a mixed breed, so to speak, giants who are a mix of both human and spirit. We read earlier in Enoch that the punishment decreed for these giants was that they would kill each other. But, here's where it gets really interesting. Because the giants were a mix of spirit and human, only their human bodies died. Their spirits lived on. According to the book of Enoch.
According to the book of Enoch. So let's keep reading. Again, this is from the book of Enoch. And now the giants who are produced from the spirits and flesh shall be called evil spirits upon the earth, and on the earth shall be their dwelling. Evil spirits have proceeded from their bodies, because they are born from men, and from the holy watchers is their beginning and primal origin. They shall be evil spirits on the earth, and evil spirits shall they be called. For as for the spirits of heaven, in heaven shall be their dwelling. But as for the spirits of the earth, which were born upon the earth, on the earth shall be their dwelling. And the spirits of the giants afflict, oppress, destroy, attack, do battle, and work destruction on the earth, and cause trouble. They take no food, but nevertheless hunger and thirst, and cause offense. And these spirits shall rise up against the children of men and against the women, because they have proceeded from them.
Wow.
Wow is right. and I don't think God's too happy with that.
No, I don't think so either. So we're told that on earth, the spirits of these dead giants would be called evil spirits. Now, their job, so to speak, was to afflict, oppress, do battle with mankind. This kind of gives new meaning to the words that Paul said when he says our battles are not against flesh and blood. In Ephesians 6, doesn't that sound kind
Absolutely.
of new way of thinking about that?
Yeah.
So remember, as a first century Jew, Paul would have been very familiar with the book of Enoch and the story of the Nephilim. It's only in the book of Enoch that we're told that the spirits of these dead giants continue to live on the earth. That piece of information is not provided in the Bible. Did Paul have this story in the book of Enoch on his mind when he wrote these words in Ephesians? Better yet, I'll ask, why wouldn't Paul have had this story on his mind?
Yeah, again, these are the things that we have to try to do is back up and from our 21st century minds,
Yes.
and remember what was familiar, what was, we didn't canonize the Bible. Paul didn't canonize the Bible. There are books, there are literature, stories that were passed down forever that he would have been familiar with.
Right.
And I believe we're hearing that come through in his book.
Exactly. And thank goodness for the Dead Sea Scrolls discovery, because we're learning a lot from that. And just the idea that there were 11 books of Enoch there indicates that that was a pretty book, as
Commonly
common
known.
as a book or scrolls
Yeah.
could be in those times, right?
Well, think about it. Think there are things that are in our zeitgeist today that are because books or movies or something that everybody has watched.
Right.
In that day, if there were that many copies of the Book of Enoch, I imagine they were pretty familiar with his writings. So, okay, in a modern book called Reversing Herman, Enoch, the Watchers, and the Forgotten Mission of Jesus Christ, the author, Dr. Michael Heiser, says this, and I quote, "If one were to ask a modern Christian, why is the world and all humanity so thoroughly wicked? The chances are very high that the answer of the fall would be forthcoming. We have been conditioned by church history, both ancient and modern, to look only to Genesis 3 for such theology. But if you ask a Jew living in the Second Temple period the same question, the answer would be dramatically different. Yes, the entrance of sin into God's good world occurred in Eden, but the unanimous testimony of a Second Temple Judaism is that the watchers are to blame for the proliferation of evil on the earth. The New Testament writers, being predominantly Jewish, products of the Second Temple period, more often than not telegraph the same outlook. We just can't see it because, frankly, we don't have a Second Temple Jewish eye. We miss what the original audience would have seen.
Just like we always say, Gary.
If you don't know what it meant to the original audience, you don't know what it means.
Exactly, exactly. So let's finish the story. Chapter 16, from the days of the slaughter and destruction and death of the giants, for the souls of whose flesh the spirits, having gone forth, shall destroy without incurring judgment. Thus shall they destroy until the day of their consummation, the great judgment, in which the age shall be consummated over the watchers and the godless, yea, shall be wholly consummated. And now, as to the watchers who have sent thee to intercede for them, who have been aforetime in heaven, say to them, you have been in heaven, but all the mysteries had not yet been revealed to you. And you knew worthless ones. And these, in the hardness of your hearts, you've made known to the women. And through these mysteries, women and men do much evil on earth. Say to them, therefore, you have no peace."
Okay, Kathy, I'm going to summarize everything you said.
Okay.
When we come back, we're going to break right now for this commercial, and we'll be right back.
Every day we pass by untold stories waiting to be heard. Those we care about may be struggling and feeling all alone. It's easy to turn away and ignore the pain, yet true friendship calls us to stand together in life's toughest moments. Sometimes the smallest gesture has the power to make the biggest difference. Be the friend who cares. Rise to the call for help. Stand by their side. Today, it's the Jewish people who need our support. They seek friends who will walk with them. Ezra International, a true friend to the Jewish people in need. Give to EzraInternational.org and become a friend to the Jewish people today.
Okay, before the break, Kathy, you made some amazing statements. Let's summarize this. The spirits of dead giants would go forth on the earth and destroy without incurring any judgment until there's the big word, till the great judgment in which the age shall be consummated over the watchers and the godless. We sometimes call this the end of the age. It would be the time we call the final judgment. Apparently, it's not just human beings who will be judged at this time, but also the watchers and the evil spirits that lived after the giants were killed. Keep this concept in mind as we address the incident in the New Testament between Jesus and the demon.
Important.
Yeah.
Now, according to Dr. Heiser, the reason a number of New Testament passages say what they say is that they are expressing a significant theme of New Testament theology. That is, the need for the reversal of the wickedness that's permeated the human race since the days of the Watchers. The title of Dr. Heiser's book, Reversing Hermon, of course alludes to what we read in 1 Enoch chapter 6. Mount Hermon is the mountain cluster near the borders of current-day Lebanon, Syria, and Israel. According to the book of Enoch, Mount Hermon is where the watchers descended from heaven, took an oath to commit the transgressions described in Genesis 6. In fact, Hermon in Hebrew actually means oath. Okay. So we're going to look at some New Testament references through the lens of the story of the watchers. Is it possible that the Bible contains hints and references to the Nephilim story, and we just haven't had the eyes to see it?
Yeah, and that's so important. And that's why we're going to look at Matthew chapter 12, verse 43 through 45 with those eyes. When the unclean spirit has gone out of a person, it passes through waterless spaces, seeking rest, but finds none. Then it says, I will return to my house from which I came. And when it comes, it finds the house empty, swept, and put in order. Then it goes and brings with it 7 other spirits more evil than itself, and they enter and dwell there. And the last state of the person is worse than the first. So also will it be in this evil generation. This passage talks about unclean spirits in waterless places, finding no rest. If you remember when we read in 1 Enoch chapter 10, that God banished Azazel, the leader of the angelic rebellion, to the desert until the time of the great judgment. In the book of Leviticus, the scapegoat, the goat for Azazel, was sent into the desert, a waterless place. So there's definitely some thematic connection there, Kathy.
That's right. Exactly. And I think that that's the key is some people could say, oh, you're just, drawing and trying to find this. But I think that's not. I think when you have something in the back of your head, an idea and story, it does come out in what you would say and what you would do and what you would write because it's there in your brain, right? And it's not in our brain, so we don't see it. But it was in their brain.
Yes, and now we can make those connections.
Exactly. But there's more. We read Enoch chapter 15 earlier in the podcast, where the spirits of the dead Nephilim would hunger and thirst, but have no way to satiate their desires, unless, of course, they entered into the bodies of human beings. The book of Enoch said these unclean spirits would afflict and oppress and cause trouble to human beings. Isn't this exactly what unclean spirits, sometimes called demons, in the New Testament do? Isn't this exactly every story we see about the demons?
They're tormenting.
Exactly.
They're tormenting, throwing individuals into the fire
and they've taken some kind of possession of their bodies, right?
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
So that's exactly what we were told about in Enoch.
Exactly. They're seeking a place to dwell.
To dwell, because they don't have the flesh, but yet they still have the fleshly desires.
Exactly. It makes complete sense, and it gives a greater context to these stories that we read about in the New Testament.
Exactly.
So let's look at another verse. Let's look at Matthew chapter 8. And it says this, and when he came to the other side, to the country of the Gadarenes, 2 demon-possessed men met him, coming out of the tombs, so fierce that no one could pass that way. And behold, they cried out, what have you to do with us, O Son of God? Have you come here to torment us before the time? Now a herd of many pigs was feeding at some distance from them. And the demons begged him, saying, if you cast us out, send us away into the herd of pigs. And he said to them, go. So they came out and went into the pigs. And behold, the whole herd rushed down the steep bank into the sea and drowned into the waters. That's Matthew chapter 8, verse 28.
Wow. So here we have, they go from this man into the pigs. They were desiring some type of way of still feeling, even if it was in the animal. That's kind of interesting too. But what's more interesting, Gary, is that this demon inside this man makes an unusual statement. And he says, have you come to torment us before the time?
Yeah.
Now, what time is he talking about? If you'll remember, we read in 1 Enoch chapter 16 that the spirits of the slain giants would torment mankind until a certain time. What time was that? We just read it. That they would destroy until the day of the consummation, the great judgment in which the age shall be consummated over the watchers and the godless. Yea, shall they be wholly consummated. So the evil spirits would torment mankind until of the great judgment, the day of the great judgment. Is it possible that what we're reading in Matthew is an acknowledgement by these evil spirits that they understand that they have free reign on earth until then? Why is this Jesus messing with them now?
Yeah.
You know?
Like you said, it's a strange statement. So how do you explain it? Well, we just, as we read, and yeah, there was going to come a time. They're going to be on the earth tormenting mankind until. And so they're saying, wait a minute, why are you here now messing with us?
Exactly. They knew it was not time.
Which is strange, is they seem to have an indication of how much time they have on the earth.
Yeah.
And here, this 2,000 years ago, Jesus is I guess a window into a day, because
Exactly.
they saw him for who he was.
Right.
As many men did not see him for who he was at the time, but the demons did.
Exactly. And there was that idea, and I've read this before, about God said, I gave you you knew worthless knowledge, and there was stuff that you didn't know. One of the ideas is that what they didn't know was that Yeshua was going to come the first time on the cross, that was something they did not know. Because if they had known that that was part of God's plan, they wouldn't have killed him. They would have tried to stop it.
That's good.
So that was important knowledge that was held back from them. And that's why they're like, wait a minute.
Yes.
Why are you here now? What's going on?
They're obviously not all knowing, but because they're spirit beings, they have a better indication of what's going on in that realm than we do.
Because they taught the women stuff that the people did not know.
Right.
So they had knowledge that people did not know, but they didn't know everything. They didn't know everything.
He taught them what they know, but he didn't tell them everything he knew.
Exactly.
Right? That's the old saying.
Exactly.
All right. Well, let's look at another New Testament passage, Matthew 16, verse 13 through 19. All of us are probably quite familiar with it, and I love this passage. And I always took groups to Caesarea Philippi when I was in Israel. Because I feel that this is such an important story, and we're going to elaborate on it. Because maybe there's something missing in our understanding about this story. When Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he questioned his disciples, "Who do people say the Son of Man is?" They replied, "Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets." "But what about you?" Jesus asked. "Who do you say that I am?" Simon Peter answered, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." Jesus replied, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by flesh and blood, but by my Father in heaven. And I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not prevail against it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven."
Now, we know, Gary, that for the Catholics, this is the verse that they use to claim that Peter was the first pope, right? Mm-hmm. So we know that that's what they use. Okay, now putting that aside, all right?
For now.
Argument, let's put it aside. We said, where does this conversation take place? It said Caesarea Philippi. And you said you took groups there. I went there too. But if you're not familiar with the geography of Israel, the location doesn't mean anything to you. But what if the location is the key to understanding what Jesus was saying? Caesarea Philippi is in the northern part of Israel at the foot of Mount Hermon. Mount Hermon. What happened there? This is where the rebellious angels made an oath with each other to engage in the forbidden act of taking human wives. This place is where the rebellion began. Not only that, when I traveled to Caesarea Philippi, I also learned, and I'm sure you taught, that the apostate king Jeroboam built an idolatrous worship center there, 1 Kings 12. This city adopted the worship of Baal going back to the time of Joshua. In Jesus' day, Caesarea Philippi was the center of worship of the god Pan, Peter Pan. That's a whole different story. There was a cultic temple carved into the side of the massive rock that was called at that time the Gates of Hell. Okay? So it was so named because the infant sacrifices that took place there in the years leading up to the time of Christ. Gary, without that background,
you don't see it. You don't have it. Yeah. And that is, again, why I felt it was such an important spot. We always made the trek to the north to see this whenever we had the time, because I felt it's important for all believers to understand what Yeshua was trying to explain here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think it's critical. I think it's absolutely critical.
Yeah. So, Kathy, what we actually have here is a dramatic statement by Jesus. These gates of hell, this demonic source going all the way back to the days of Noah, will not prevail. You know, from Reversing Herman, we often think of this phrase as though God's people are in a posture of having to bravely fend off Satan and his demons. This is simply incorrect. Gates are a defensive structure, not an offensive weapon. The kingdom of God is the aggressor. Think about it. Jesus goes to ground zero of the devastating angelic rebellion and makes a victorious war cry. His Father's kingdom will prevail.
Wow.
All right. Well, then why don't we pick that up in our next podcast, Kathy? We'll see you next time. God bless you.